Welcome to this edition of the Presbyterian and Reformed Churchmen in sweltering hot Chattanooga, Tennessee. Sweltering hot but beautiful Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm here with a friend, Tim Shorey. He's a ruling elder at what church?
Uptown Church.
Oh, Uptown where?
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah, so Tim and I, it's funny, we're only an hour away. For 2 or 3 years, we've been saying, we got to grab coffee, but we are online and texting friends. And so wanted to have a ruling elder on to just discuss General Assembly. It's Friday morning. We're grabbing breakfast at a very cool, historic, or at least well-known coffee shop called Rembrandt's, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so check it out if you're ever in Chattanooga. There's an awesome outdoor sitting area that looks like a garden. We try to segregate and separate away. Hopefully you can hear us over the birds and the steam coming off the pavement. It's legit hot, man. This is going to be a quick update. I'm sure there's a lot of good podcasts you can listen to doing lots of analysis. But we're going to give our overall impressions and some of the larger items or more significant items in people's minds that happened over this week at General Assembly. First, though, before we get into business, Tim, tell people again where you're at and tiny bit about yourself.
Yeah.
What you do.
Married, 3 kids, 16, 14, and 8. Ruling elder at Uptown Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been in the PCA for about 8 years. Been on session for about 6, third session, and we're going through a major transition here in terms of we're moving our building from where we've been for 25 years to a new location. That's happening this Sunday. We voted to call a new associate.
Wait, go back to that. So
okay.
Did you own your property?
We don't.
Okay.
No, we've been, it's hard to own property in Charlotte.
It's
and
one of those growth areas.
Yeah. So we've been renting. It wasn't a great relationship with our landlords, though we'd been there for more than 25 years. And so now we're moving to a new location this coming Sunday.
Great. Oh, that's awesome. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So we'll get into GA. Well, I mean, like, just the normal camaraderie, energy. It's that's been the last few years, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it was great. The longer you're in the denomination and the more you attend GA, the more it just feels like a brotherhood where you're just spending, like, even with the guys you disagree with, you're enjoying the time together, you're fellowshipping together, you're enjoying the unity of the gospel together, and you're worshiping together.
Yes.
It's a beautiful time.
Yeah.
Really,
I mean, I even found guys that are usually on the opposite side of issues that sometimes, I don't think it's intemperate to say sometimes we get on their nerves, they get on our nerves. The speeches this year from the floor really were not like that. I guess there was one speech that ruffled some feathers.
There was one. But I agree. In Overtures committee, which I was able to serve on this year, as well as on the floor, we saw guys who usually would be on the other side of an issue making speeches for the other side.
That was weird.
It was
in both cases, by the way.
Both cases.
Yes.
Because they saw the fundamental value of what the other side was trying to accomplish, and so that level of unity and reaching across the aisles, I think, was really refreshing.
Yeah, and some of that I think too was the desire to love one another through disagreement in cases where it was obvious what was going to happen. I mean, these votes, for the most part, were not close. Whichever side they fell out on, it was not close votes, except for the nominating committee votes, which were super close.
Those were tight.
But on the issues, so that's why it did seem like guys came over from one side or the other to what would be the majority side, maybe for unity's sake.
Yeah, I think so. And it may be that there wasn't much to lose at that point, but still, it was a healthy way to express brotherhood.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that was. Sometimes you'd be surprised. They'd step up to the mic and you'd expect them to say in the affirmative or in the negative, and they said the opposite. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
One thing that I guess frustrated me, and maybe I got to check my heart in it, but it was a packed docket. All the committee of commissioner reports had a lot to say. There were motions coming out of all of them, which is great, and I have no issue with that. But in things that were near unanimous, people wanted to still debate them. And so, like the RPR report, I think, went on for 3.5 hours, which it was scheduled, I think, for 3, but it probably could have been an hour and a half.
Easily. Yeah, it could have been less than that, I think.
Right.
We ended up.
Well, hold on. So people wanted to discuss things that didn't change at all.
Correct.
It was like 1,000 votes to 300 or 400 votes every time. And the moderator, Kevin DeYoung, even said, like, guys, these votes aren't changed. So the RPR report was passed exactly how it was presented.
Right. Yeah, we spent 3.5 hours debating stuff that was exactly. We could have passed it in 10 minutes.
Probably, yeah. And by the way, the same thing with overtures. Like, they pulled out maybe 10 overtures from what would have been an omnibus, and none of those changed.
That's right.
So, we got out late last night. But and I know I'm cutting you off. Let's loop back. So the assembly opened up let's talk about some of the controversy quick and down and dirty quick, and then we'll get to some the other highlights. So Dr. Brian Chappell resigned. We knew this a few weeks now. His statement to us and with his wife there was endearing and touching, and I think I don't know. I appreciated it, and I love the man. So
yeah, he Brian served the denomination for years in tremendous ways. He's dedicated his life to the PCA, and I think we're all grateful for it. His statement was brief and sincere, and his apology and repentance were authentic, and I think well received by the body.
Yeah. And so that whole item that we were really concerned was going to cast a shadow over the denomination, I think it just wasn't there. I think he did the honorable right thing, and we moved on. And John Bice has become a friend, and he's just a super respected guy. No matter who you are in the denomination, there's nothing negative anybody could say about John Bice as the new provisional stated clerk.
He was the right man for the AC to choose.
Yeah,
in my opinion, I think it's a great. I think it was a great selection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other one that was, controversial and really was very uncomfortable was multiple times with Dr. Irwin Ince, the M&A coordinator, just because I think mainly because last year they ran a $2 million deficit in the general fund, and there was a number of questions about his leadership and those things. Nothing about his character. Everybody was very careful to say that. But then because of that, also the budget and salary came up. But there's no changes there. He's still our director. He's another man who's a real, like, if you could say about a man, just a sweetheart, great to talk to. I appreciate him, and I'm sure whatever frustrations people may have with him, I'm sure he has heard that at this point.
Yeah, it's I don't know of anyone who is critical of Irwin in terms of who he is and his pastoral heart for the denomination. Some people differ with him in terms of his perspective on approach and so on, but I think the real concern there was budgetary and management of that organization. And I think we have more work to do there in terms of figuring out what the oversight looks like. How do we make sure that it's operating effectively well and using the denomination's resources effectively? And I think that'll be ongoing over the next year or two. But I don't think anybody has any concerns about Irwin's character and his pastoral heart for the denomination.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they have put measures in place to correct not only the budget shortfall on the spending side, but also in the fundraising side. And
yes.
So, but then we got Kevin DeYoung.
Yeah.
He was a great moderator.
Yeah, he was a great moderator. A lot of good dry humor. It's always fun to see some of the banter between guys like Fred Greco and Tipton and the moderator as they kind of go back and forth about parliamentary procedure. And Kevin's Kevin's exhortations to the body to keep things brief, to keep them new, so we're not being repetitive, and to move us along were all very much appreciated. And Kevin's ministry has been fantastic.
Oh yeah, you're right there. You're not far from there. Yeah, so he did a phenomenal job. I mean, honestly, among the best I've ever seen at a General Assembly. He kept us moving in great ways. Lots of sense of humor, just sort of in his own dry way. And speaking of sense of humor, best speech I think was still Zach Bird.
Oh, the man is a treasure. He brings a good amount of joy to the assembly every year.
Yeah, he said so. Last year it was like cornstarch in a graveyard. The plot is going to thicken. This year it was the MTW was as busy as a one-handed monkey with two bananas.
Yes.
Oh man, that's
and some good commentary on hush puppies.
Oh yeah, well, hush puppies is probably the new.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I was wondering what else. That was right. So, as we said, RPR was Tuesday morning and passed exactly how it was. Oh, before we get to RPR, I guess let's brush over the RAO. There were some RAO changes, which is rules of assembly operations, that didn't pass. You need 2/3 votes for those.
Yeah.
And one of those issues would come up again later, and it did pass in a different way. But this shows the importance of being at the assembly. I think there were only 1,500 votes Tuesday night, and we needed 2/3 of the votes. And there was easily 500 or 600 people not in the assembly hall to be voting. So these amendments to the RAO passed majorities, but didn't have 2/3.
Yeah, in some cases, I think we missed 2/3 by only a couple votes, like single-digit votes.
I didn't realize it was that close, but I know we were over 60%.
Yeah, we were very close. It was interesting to your point about people being on the floor. We had 2,200, I think, 22 plus.
22 plus, yeah.
Commissioners. But I don't think any of our votes across the entire assembly exceeded 1,900 votes.
You know what? There was one last night that there was like a raucous applause because it hit 2,000.
Okay.
And I forgot if it was the Christian nationalism one or one of those. But you're right. Most of them, even the contended ones, or not even contentious, but you know what I mean.
Debated ones.
1,800.
Yeah.
1,850. Honestly, there were some. I mean, I was there for every vote, but some votes I didn't vote on. I just, it was like some of the unanimous ones, and I was making some notes, and I was just like, that's, and it was like there were like 50 nays. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that could be some of it, but
that could be. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. So okay. We don't have to talk about the RAO. Let's go to RPR the next day. There were at least two major things with review of presbytery records that were cited. And the way RPR works is the report is reported. It's hundreds and hundreds of pages of citations of presbyteries, of things in their minutes that the denomination is questioning, and they have to do something with for next General Assembly. They have to report more information or something. It's not always clear what they need to do to me. But the two big ones one was a number of paedo communion exceptions were granted by presbyteries. So men who believe it's okay to give communion to young children who haven't professed faith or babies. And they're granted that exception. I presume they're not supposed to practice it, but they're allowed to hold it. And the other one was, let's talk about that one first.
Yeah.
Good.
I think comprehensively, those exceptions were taken with the stated note specifically that they would not practice it.
Okay.
But I think that issue is so vitally important to our system of doctrine, given the fact that the sacraments are core to what is a true church, that to have an elder in the church who takes an exception to that issue is so fundamentally important that it does merit an exception of substance. It strikes at the vitals. And so I think it's good that the body upheld what RPR did And those presbyteries need to supply us more information so we know exactly why they allow that exception.
Right. And so what RPR said is that is not an allowable exception, right? Is that what?
Yeah, they said that that to grant that exception is allowing something that strikes at the vitals of our system of doctrine to operate within our bounds. And so they need to explain why they would allow such a grave exception to persist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And what is also interesting is many of the guys that want to support and allow that exception is allowable are some of the most vocal against Christian nationalism coming out of like Moscow, which is very paedo-communion oriented. And so like there often is the same people that are supporting paedo-communion are very often the same people that the denomination wants to investigate as far as Christian nationalism. So that was a weird. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
It's kind of a weird difference where they're saying no, we want to allow that exception, but we don't like the whole other ideology that comes with it.
I hadn't thought about that connection, but I think you might be right there. That there's a strange marriage there.
Yeah. So so the denomination is upholding that is not an acceptable exception. The other one that's interesting, and this is not a right-left issue, is that the practice to appoint men to committee of commissioners for each General Assembly to sit on and oversee and evaluate the committee's work. The presbytery nominates them, they're elected, they're voted on, but what happens when positions go unfilled, the general practice is presbyteries appoint them or empower the moderator to appoint those positions. So what happened with that one?
Yeah, so what RPR cited and what the assembly agreed with was that appointments can only be made by a commission or the entire body. And so the practice of a clerk or moderator self-appointing men for committees of commissioners is inappropriate. Now that's a practice that it's taken place in my presbytery. It's taken place in a lot of presbyteries.
Maybe most.
Probably. I think what we decided was the right call per our polity, but it is going to cause some procedural angst in terms of how we move forward.
Yeah, like to me, almost every presbytery does this, but like what did Tipton say? I'm a rules as written guy.
Yes, exactly.
The presbytery has to elect. And so if the presbytery has to do that, that means either the presbytery or a commission of the presbytery.
Yes.
And a commission requires 2 ruling elders and 2 teaching elders. And they argued that would be undue burden to try to fill these positions because they wouldn't be able to have a meeting. And honestly, like this happens over email. This happens over Zoom. This is not undue. You could schedule a call 2 or 3 weeks before General Assembly, approve those nominees. Our presbytery, one of the presbyteries I've been in, because I'm no longer in that presbytery, this came up a couple of years ago where the appointed commissioner couldn't make it. His mother had a car accident. She was elderly. And the moderator the moderator appointed himself to that commission, even though another ruling elder from the same church was there and very knowledgeable, and there was nothing we could do about it because the moderator's empowered to appoint. Yeah. So, it is a matter of fairness and just transparency, I think.
Yeah.
And our polity.
Yeah, I think we ruled in alignment with our polity. And I think it does solve a problematic practice that usually doesn't present issues, but when it presents an issue, it presents a real issue.
Right. So appoint a commission and just do it the way.
The solution's simple.
Right.
Yeah.
It was amazing to me how guys argued based on precedent. Precedent doesn't trump Constitution.
Correct.
There was a lot of precedent in Israel to worship on the high places over centuries, and they still needed to be torn down.
Yeah.
Not that that's on the same level as this, but you get the point. Precedent is not, So we got to kind of speed through a number of these. The administrative committee had they had over 30 recommendations, but 2 very important ones, I think, people were interested in these 2. And one was the same thing as the RAO change. So there was trying to change our rules That failed because we didn't have the 2/3 votes. But there was another overture that just said direct the stated clerk not to collect data based on ethnicity.
Yes.
It also said age, but that was removed because guys in the AC were arguing that it's valuable to have age and data because CDM uses it for curriculum and there's other metrics. And so age was removed, but no, not to collect data on ethnicity. And this overwhelmingly passed. And I would say for people who are upset about this, as Mel Duncan said, this has only gone on for 2 years. In our whole history of our denomination, we've only tried is the the operative word there. Tried to collect this data for 2 years, and most people don't provide it.
Yeah, I think we did the right thing here. So the RAO didn't pass, but it was a strong majority that voted in favor of it. And when it came to the overture, again, it passed with a strong majority. I think that we heard some great speeches from our brothers on the floor, minority brothers, who indicated, I am counted in the general population of the church. Yeah, I don't need to be counted by my race.
Right.
And I think it's important for us to be collecting data broadly. We're unified in Christ. There are no there are no national and racial separations here. We are all united in Christ and should be counted as such.
Yeah. I think some of the most compelling speeches were of men of different races.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The other one was, so that was Overture 42. Overture 44 regarding by faith, there was an overture that wanted to make it a press release only publication and just give us the facts, the news, which they did marvelously throughout General Assembly, honestly. But there was some frustration about the different kinds of editorial articles that were coming out of it. It was argued by men on both sides, on the permanent committee and in the committee of commissioners, that we need this publication. It just needs better editorial oversight. So let's not gut it, especially when we're going to have a new stated clerk, and we won't have that man until next year. And so what the AC did, I was a part of this and supportive of this, was charge the administrative committee with evaluating their oversight policies and editorial policies for by faith and come back to the General Assembly with an assessment of those, needed changes to those, and get a policy basically approved through General Assembly. And if no changes are suggested, why no changes are suggested. It does give the Assembly 2 years to do this, and people were frustrated, but the thought there is we're going to have a new stated clerk in a year. Let's have that man help craft this so he could own it and lead it. And I think, similar to maybe some of the other controversies, the will of the body has been shared regarding by faith. I don't know that we need a vote to hopefully start to see the improvements that we want.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think given where we are in the history of the denomination, the transition period that we're in with the stated clerk, I think this was the right decision for us to make at this time.
Yeah. Okay, so now we get to just basic overtures, and let's try to breeze through these. I'm the one who's long-winded. All right, a big one, probably the one they thought was going to be the biggest, was Overture 9. What was Overture 9 going to do?
Overture 9 was to have the administrative committee, the nominees to the administrative committee that came from the permanent committees, be non-voting members, where currently they are voting.
And they hold 45% of the votes. So the administrative committee, which obviously is very powerful and influential, makes a lot of decisions, and rightly so, has 20 members. 11 are elected by the General Assembly. The other 9 are appointed by the 9 permanent committees. Now, they were elected to the permanent committees, but they weren't elected to the administrative committee. So we were trying to say they should have a voice. They should be in the room, given the right of the floor, but let's not have them vote. That roundly failed. And so that issue is dealt with. We trust our permanent committees. And but what was interesting is that was supposed to be the big one of the Assembly, and it really just passed, even with very bipartisan support.
Yeah.
If we could speak in partisanship terms.
Yeah.
interesting, a minority report passed for Overture 12, which was an overture that the Overtures Committee recommended that would limit distribution of the Lord's Supper elements to be officers only. And there was all kinds of debate about this, and a minority report came to the floor as a substitute motion, and that passed. So there is no limit to who the session can determine can distribute the elements from the minister to the congregation.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Overture 19, new membership vows. There was a move to add a vow and kind of talk about the Imago Dei in them, which the vow looked great, but there's not a desire to change the membership vows. That failed. A change to the voting age, Overture 22, failed. And by the way, Overtures Committee agreed with these things, and the Assembly agreed. We're not going to put a restriction on the voting age of members in congregational meetings. Overture 8 was an interesting one. So what did that say? Stated differences.
Yeah. So this was around specifically ruling elders and deacons who state differences from the confessions, where currently our teaching elders need to have their stated differences recorded in their own words, and the court of which they're a part, the presbytery, rules whether or not those differences are acceptable. This essentially applies the same thing for ruling elders and for deacons, and requires that they be reported in the session minutes. It's simply a matter of consistency. There's parity between teaching elders and ruling elders in terms of the office, and so it's important that our ruling elders understand the confession, state their differences in the confession, and that the body that they're a part of would rule on those about whether or not there's an allowable exception.
But it includes deacons too.
Deacons as well.
So that's interesting. And, nobody said this on the floor, but I know from personal experience and through talking to many, many churches, that's going to be a major change, because I'm not sure how well trained deacons are necessarily in the Westminster standards. And honestly, even in some churches, the ruling elders, I know the broad brushes are occurring, but I'm not sure the granular conversations are happening. And now they will, and they'll be in the minutes, and presbyteries will be evaluating them.
Yeah. What I'm thankful to say is that in our church, the deacons and the ruling elders go through exactly the same training and curriculum. I think that's a good practice. And so
ours too, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's fairly common.
Right.
I think it's important to make sure that these men are leaders in the church. It's important to understand where they fall as it relates to our confessional standards.
Yeah. Okay, some others that we'll breeze through. Overture 10 was to make it so that assistant pastors have a pathway, a mandated path into being an associate pastor, and that was referred back to the presbytery, so there's no change there. The elevation of a censure, so in discipline cases, for instance, if somebody is suspended from the table, there's been confusion and inconsistency on if the session wants to excommunicate them, if they need a new trial. Some would say yes, some would say no. This passed such that you don't have to have a new trial, but I do believe you need to have a hearing, so you can't just do it administratively.
Yeah.
The questions for young members. So was there an age given to this, or just said children?
It was just no age.
No age. So this Overture 33 gives you some guidance on how to assess if young members should be admitted to the table and given full rights of membership and considered, professing believers. So it included, obviously, credible profession of faith, age appropriate, an understanding of the membership vows, and an understanding of the table. I would also assume, age appropriately.
Yeah. This is one where I thought it was important before. By the end of the floor debate, I thought it was even more important. We heard some, what I think were very concerning speeches about the practice of churches who are approving admittance to the table for very, very young kids. I think it was even said as young as 5, when they didn't necessarily understand or couldn't understand the membership vows. And so there was one gentleman who indicated that they were admitting to communing membership, but not requiring vows because they didn't think that the children could understand those vows, which I'm sensitive to. But maybe we need to have the vows. We need to
Yes.
understand what communion is, and we need to understand the gospel. I think this was a no-brainer of an overture, and I'm glad that we passed it.
Right. Also, it would seem if you're admitting kids to the table without vows, um, we're losing a valuable tool to our kids to remember
Yes.
because in our broad evangelicalism there's the whole altar call, go up to the altar, and we don't do that, but we do let people stand before the congregation and profess with their mouth. And in moments of doubt, people, I coach people, well, go back to that moment.
Yeah.
Not that moment
Absolutely.
saved you, but that was a moment where you professed. Cling to the
Yes.
faith,
Yes.
So yeah, good deal. Overture 26 to approve a committee to work on a directory of worship passed. This is a big moment for the denomination. This goes back to our founding. It was always the intention. And so my understanding is over the next number of general assemblies, this committee will evaluate, perfect, and present for approval various chapters of the directory of worship for constitutionalization.
Yeah, I think this may be the most important thing that we did this year. I think some of the objections that we heard to it were almost as if it would be a top-down imposition of a directory of worship that would limit people's practice. And I think what those men were forgetting was that everything this committee does will come before the General Assembly for a vote. And then when the General Assembly votes on it, it will then go to the presbyteries to ratify and confirm. This won't be a top-down situation. This will be a true grassroots directory.
Yes.
It's just informed by a small group of men who are specifically tasked with studying it. I think it's a great move that we made.
Yeah, and it's a path forward.
Yes.
For, now hopefully we won't have multiple overtures each year trying to approve various parts of this. This is going through a committee who is working on this as opposed to just haphazard, which is the way it had to be in the past.
Exactly.
So yeah, good deal. And then the last two are the two on Christian nationalism. We'll take the second one first. The Overture 48 was requesting a pastoral letter on the issue. It was kind of interesting because what was passed wasn't a pastoral letter, and it didn't even cover what was in the overture, but it's essentially the ARP's. Oh no. Oh man, I hope I didn't lose it. Oh, there it is. It's rolling.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I don't know if I'm going to edit this out. So we just had technical difficulties and lost it. Now we're back. So we approved the ARP's statement by friend Benjamin Glasser of the ARP that condemns ethno-nationalism, kinism, race realism, and just affirms that immutable characteristics based on, I don't have the actual statement in front. Is it in here?
It probably is. Yeah, right here.
I'll just read it. That the 52nd General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in America does hereby join with the Associate Reformed Presbyterian Church and the RPCNA, I'm abbreviating here, in condemning without distinction any theological or political teaching which posits superiority of race or ethnic identity born of immutable human characteristics, and does call to repentance any who would promote or associate themselves with such teaching, either by commission or omission. So Guy said, not a perfect statement, but needs to be said. It's this weird thing. It's going on an hour from you and 20 minutes from me. The church was 20 minutes from me in Winston-Salem in the ARP that the church got blown up over this.
Yeah.
So it is in NAPARC, and this roundly just denounced it, and some things can just be said. But then Overture 47 seeks to study so-called Christian nationalism and all that. And so that's where the denomination approved it, and men on both sides. Men you wouldn't have thought spoke on it.
It was pretty unified.
Yeah.
Pretty unified. And it clearly, there's a broad sense of need for this. And so I'm hopeful that the output is productive. Now, we have a tremendous amount of already approved studies around racial relations and church and state that I think we should utilize in the meantime, because
Yeah.
this is going to take a couple years for them to produce this document. We should make sure that those churches and presbyteries who are particularly affected by this use that already good material in the interim.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I came to the point where I was like, all last year I was kind of against this because I just didn't see the issue in our denomination. Now I'm like more, okay, it's not gonna like it. I actually think it will provide a good tool.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to do what some people hope it will, and but our tradition actually has great resources and history in
Yes.
this. This is not like we're coming to this thing fresh. So
We're not starting from ground zero.
no. So that was basically the assembly. We ended late last night, before 11, so that's not bad. And now we're heading home. So any final thoughts or words?
It was a great assembly, and always a joy to be with the brothers, to do the work at the church. And I was saying to some people that there's few sounds that are better than 3,000 or so Presbyterians singing psalms and hymns. And
Yes.
that's one of the great joys of every assembly, is just hearing that group of people sing at the top of their lungs our praises to our Lord and Savior. So it was a joy to be here, and on to next year.
Yes. I know it's always like bittersweet when it ends. You want to get home to your family, but yeah, we even sang an imprecatory psalm a
Yeah, how
cappella.
about that?
That
How
was
about
like,
that?
it was good stuff. So, well, thanks for tuning in again. I'm sure there's episodes that have much better analysis, but we wanted to share on this. Also, I'm obviously wearing my ministry to state swag, so the news is out. I'm heading to Florida. That position opened, and it's really in the best interests of my family, both my parents who are down there and our own family. So we're heading to Tallahassee to do ministry in the state capital there. And so if you're in Florida, especially ruling elder, teaching elder, or just congregant, connect with me. I'd love to connect with you, see how we could partner. Also want to plug Birmingham Theological Seminary. Have you taken classes there?
Yeah, I'm currently in the MDiv program there.
See,
Great.
it's such
Love
a
it.
yeah. I mean, whether you're a ruling elder, a teaching elder, have an MDiv, don't have that, just want to bone up on your polity, or get a master's degree, or whatever it is, they have programs, classes, flexibility to do that with great professors. So check out our friends at bts.education. Thanks. This is George and Tim for the PNR Churchman. Oh, show them the polity matters pin.
Oh, I got to pull it off here. Hang on. Here we go. Polity matters, guys.
The swag of the GA.
Great dudes.